Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Wednesday. It's hump day, and you know what that means? It's time for a little master class session. Now today we're going to be showing power users how to create shops. And I've got a couple examples here that I can kind of share with you, and that way you can kind of get an idea of what I mean by that, what I mean by shops, and it will also allow some time for people to kind of filter in. So this first one is like a monster part shop. Hey, first time chatter. Blink as, love that you're here. Awesome. So we've got a couple examples here just to kind of give you an idea of what you kind of create and what we might be making today. We have like a monster parts vendor shop here. Hey, another first time chatter. Glad that you're here. Awesome. Love it. Love to see these new faces. We've got a monster parts vendor shop, a spell shop, a clockmaker shop. So you're kind of getting the idea. Lots of different types of shop ideas. A potion shop, a rare plant shop, an apothecary, and even like a cyberpunk weapon shop. And all of that stuff you can make knowing some basic rudimentary things about graphical projections. So I'll go ahead and just open up this map and we'll start here. I definitely recommend when you're using like this type of graphical projection, either the top-down oblique or axonometric, that you use the portrait aspect ratio, because when you're using this top-down style, you're going to need the space in a vertical sense. So having this portrait aspect ratio is going to be most helpful. So I'll kind of open it up. I mean, you can use really any aspect ratio you want, but I've kind of noticed that it works well with portrait. It's just my opinion. So let's kind of go over some basic stuff. I'm just going to give you some rudimentary understanding. I'm not going to go too much into the math of it. A lot of artists tend to blend a lot of these styles together because it just looks good, instead of focusing too much on like a certain art style being exactly orthographic or exactly top-down oblique or exactly axonometric. Artists tend to go to what looks good, and that can mix these types of graphical projections together. So let's talk about first what kind of graphical projections there are. And the first one's called an orthographic projection. And that just means it's a face of something with no perspective, no foreshortening, anything like that. It has no 1 or 2 point perspective. You notice that it's just flat. So our Fantasy Battlemap style has orthographic stamps where you see this crate, but there's no perspective involved, right? If there was perspective, then you would probably have some kind of point. And then the vanishing point, 1 point perspective or 2 point, that means they would have some perspective to it. Orthographic removes any kind of perspective at all. And this translates better for the viewer because now you can make a world or a battle map or a map using this, and it doesn't too difficult because you don't have to worry about all the various perspectives, vanishing points, and all that stuff. So this translates better like to either a video game or a battle map or whatever. So orthographic is simple, flat, and there is no perspective whatsoever. Fantasy Battle Maps has that. There's some exceptions with Fantasy Battle Maps about this. There are some stamps in the Fantasy Battle Map style or the other Battle Map styles where there is some perspective in the stamp, because sometimes it's hard to translate some objects or some things as purely orthographic, and adding a little bit of perspective to it can make it easier to translate what that stamp is, right? A crate is an easy example because it's just a cube, right? And so it's easy to translate, but some things are not easy to translate from orthographic, and so you add a little bit of perspective into it. The next one is called top-down oblique, and this one is pretty simple. Top-down oblique uses a top-down perspective, but it shows two faces. It shows the depth and the height. For example, I've taken this crate that you see at the top, and I put two of them, stacked them on top of each other. And all I did was just make the bottom face, or the height part of the stamp, I made it a little bit darker. By using contrast, I make one face look different from the other. Now, the one thing about top-down oblique is that the dimension stays the same. So you'll notice that this side of the crate is exactly the same size and dimensions as the top part of the crate, right? It remains the same. The perspective is the same. All right. So not too complex. With top-down oblique, you're showing the two faces, a front face and a top face, or the height and the depth. Now, top-down oblique looks a little odd, right? Because it seems weird that both the faces are exactly the same size. So top-down oblique isn't something that I will have every single thing that I make inside of the shop will be top-down oblique. I might want to do axonometric, which means adding some foreshadowing to it. So you'll notice that here, when I made this front face, I changed the height just a little bit. And if you notice this top face here, I changed the height quite a bit to show what's called foreshortening. And this makes the crate look a little bit more realistic instead of the two crates at the exact same dimensions, right? So axonometric. Now, when we're making the shop, we might mix a little bit of the both between top-down oblique and axonometric. And it really depends on what it is you're making. For instance, if you're making a table, maybe you want to go with top-down oblique because we have a orthographic projections for our stamps. To have an axonometric desk means that we'd have to do some kind of foreshortening with the stamps themselves. So in other words, it really depends on what you're making, on which style or which projection you'll be using. Again, the table might be top-down oblique because the stuff I want to put on the table is more orthographic, and I can't do any type of foreshortening outside of width and height. All right, so I'll do a mix of both. So it's important to kind of know the difference. So orthographic, no perspective whatsoever, just a flat one face. Then you have your top-down oblique. Two faces, but the exact same dimensions. Both the depth and the height are the same. Axonometric is quite different. The height and the depth are going to change, so there might be some foreshortening, as you can see in that top part of the crate. So I hope this kind of helps to kind of understand some basics about the graphical projections that we're using. Now, while I prep the canvas a little bit, why don't everyone who's watching, why don't you guys kind of decide what kind of shop we're going to make? It could be a magic spell shop. It could be a trinket shop. Maybe you want to make like an orc's weapon bazaar, or you want to have like an elven kitchen, whatever it might be, right? So if you guys in here in the chat come up with some ideas, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll kind of come up with some ideas on what kind of shop to make. And I'll give you the process that I go through when I'm making that shop. So go ahead and drop those through while I kind of, a fish shop. So like a fishmonger's market. I like that. There's also a magic gem and an orc weapon shop. I like all of it. All of this stuff is really, really good. I'll let a couple more people kind of decide what they want to make. I'm all for the magic gem or an orc weapon shop. Yeah, so we got two people now for the weapon shop. And I do like the orc idea because then it kind of gives us a theme and then we know what kind of stamps to make. So, and that's like one of the steps is now that you kind of understand the graphical projections, we have to decide what kind of shop to make, and you generally pick a theme. So I'm seeing a continuous theme here, a weapon shop. I'm going to go ahead and make it an orc weapon shop specifically because then that will give it a much more, a different theme to it besides just a regular weapon shop. So I think that will be more interesting. Hey, first time chatter. A blacksmith is also awesome. I like that idea. But there seems to be quite a want for the weapon shop, so I like that. Oh, I missed a first-time chatter. Do we do Twitch drops? I don't remember if we do or not. I have to go check later. I can get back to you on that maybe after the stream, okay? All right, so weapon shop it is. I like that idea. That's helpful. So when I first put my shop together, what I'll end up doing is I'll make the floor and the back wall, just like with the crates, right? The floor is going to kind of represent the depth, and then when you have the wall, that shows you how much depth there is on the floor. And that's going to be important because you want to have some room on the floor between the foreground layer, which is what we're going to put a table there. Most shops have like what's called a storefront, and a storefront has like a front counter, a cash register, a place in which you do commerce between the owner of the shop and the patrons, right? So we want to have a front desk. We also want to add the floor texture, and we want to add a back wall. Another first-time chatter. Yep, I like that. Bookstores are great. I love bookstores. And just so you know, I do have some bookstore shops on my profile, the Maddie profile. So if you're looking for that, they're easy to find. All of the maps I showed you earlier, too, all of those are on the profile, my profile, the Maddie profile. If you just type in shop on the Explore page, you'll probably find them because I put shop in parentheses. so that way you can always get those when they pop up. So first I want to pick like a floor texture. And what I'll do is I'll turn on the grid, and I'll make the grid real big, like 15, like about that size looks good. And that way I can kind of use it as a guide, because I'm going to be making my floorboards. I'm going to be making maybe like a floor runner, some side panels, and I want to be able to make all that stuff. Using the grid is helpful. Yes, I'm Mati, by the way. That's me. I do the videos and I do that. I do that. So yeah, that's all the same guy. Mwah. Okay, so let's decide where we want the floor to be. And when I go into my textures, I want to pick a certain texture that I want. You'll notice that there are some new stuff in here. I wanted to showcase some of this stuff while we're here. There are, with 2.0, we're adding some new additions, and we're revising some old stamps as well. Now, not every single stamp will be revised at 2.0 released, but some stamps will be revised. And then as we do the release and we continue on, we'll be revising throughout the year, revising the art, because we're going to want to update the art to make it look more detailed, remove some of that chalky lining. All of that stuff is going to be kind of helpful. So you can see there are some new textures here. So you have a lot of cool options that are kind of coming up here. Lots of cool stuff. Really enjoy that. Like you have some dungeon editions. We have some stuff for dwarven stuff. All that stuff is going to be involved in 2.0, so I'm super excited about that. I'm going to just use this rough stone path. I think this is going to work out fine, and I want to use it because I like the varying sizes of the stone. Like some of our cobblestone textures, all the stones are exactly the same size, but with this stone right here in the catalog, go back into it so you can see it. It's called Rough Stone Path. You'll notice the stones are varying sizes. I really like this texture, and because of that, it's very helpful. But what I think I will do is I'll kind of desaturate it to where it's like this dark granite stone. And I'll also bring the texture scale just a little bit upward, because we're doing a zoomed in shot scene. And so I'll make the textures zoomed in a little bit larger. And then I'll use the grid when I'm painting. So I'll go over to the grid right here, and then I'll go ahead and go with the BG layer. And remember, when you're factoring in how big your floor is, that depends on what you're going to have in the shop, right? The front desk is going to occupy the front part or the foreground of the map. But what about things in the middle ground? That's going to be in between the foreground, which is the table or the countertop, and the wall. And that might be like workbenches, displays for the weapons, weapon stands. All of those things need to have some space. So you need to create some space. So if I go ahead and take about this size right here, I might have enough room for the front table, as well as some floor room for, I don't know, some kind of displays for the weapons, or maybe some of the weapons are hanging from the ceiling so you can kind of see them that way. Really just depends on how you want to go about doing it. So I think for now this should be enough space. And then I want to create the division between the floor and the back wall. And so I'll choose the line tool, pick a stamp, and which stamp you choose is really up to what kind of back wall you're going to have. Now, because this is maybe like an orc's tent or something like that, we might want to show that there's like maybe cloth or something in the background. So maybe we want to choose like a rug texture, and then we'll add in some lighting and shadows to kind of create the tent effect. Or we can just go into orc stamps and look that up as well, like orc, oopsie, ORC. So you see the different stamps here. Notice that you have some like tent openings here. You have that stuff. So something more like that look might work well. So if I go into my textures here, and you can look for things in the left panel, and you can look up orc right here, and you'll see this various stuff here. I think this animal skin floor only will have an animal skin back wall, and I'll probably change the texture of the floor to maybe dirt instead. Maybe that might make more sense. Let me just check the scale real quick. Yep, see, it's way too small. This is why you always got to scale up. And I might rotate it a little bit like this as well. Here we go, like this. I think that looks okay. And we'll change that floor texture to maybe some dirt instead. I think that might work better. Let's go with this sooty ground. I think that works a little bit better. Okay, and I want to show some kind of distinction between the floor. So I think for now that looks okay. Let me turn that grid off so I can take a look at it. I think that looks good. Okay. Now from here, I don't need to stick with these textures and all of this. This not has to be perfect. What you want to do is just get the general idea of the space, right? The floor section and the wall section. Don't worry about making it perfect. That first step is done. Now I know where my floor and my wall is. That's perfect. Now I can work on my next step. I want to create my foreground. That means what's going to be in the foreground? It's going to be like a table. And there are different ways to go about making a table. Like I do think you can type in table, Fantasy Battlemaps. You'll notice with the line tool, there are various tables that you can use. Right here, you'll see some new ones, these market editions, some revised stuff, some dwarven stuff. So you can use the line tool. Because some of you might not have the 2.0 access, you can use the bar table. That works fine. I'm going to just use a regular table itself. I'm not a stamp itself because I'm not going to worry about using the line tool. So I'll just type in table first, and you'll see all the various tables. I'm going to go with the most basic, a very simple table, this long table with the core, like this, and we're going to scale it up. And I'm going to make the top face, or the depth part. Remember, the depth. This is going to be the table in which all the stuff is going to be on, like maybe a cash register, maybe a weight for weighing money. Maybe there's like a book, like a check-in. Maybe it's a barter system. So maybe there's some weapons on the table that you're bartering for different weapons. Might be that stuff. Access to 2.0 only comes right now, I think, if you're a champion or in our early access. So, and there is a process to get into early access. So once you've picked your table, you're going to pick another table and you're going to copy and paste it. I'm going to push this down a layer. And what I want to do is I'm going to create the table top. That's the top part of the table, the top. And I'm going to bring the brightness down a little bit. And then here's the table top part right here like this. And I'll make it up here in the brighter side so you can see it. It's a little harder to see down here in the dark. So you can kind of see that first part. And then I'll group this and call it table top. Now I did do this projection right here. I'm using not orthographic, but top-down oblique right here, right? You notice how I didn't do any foreshortening for the table. When I open it up, if I wanted to add foreshortening, I would do this. And now there's some foreshortening to it. But I'm not going to do that because the stamps themselves in the Fantasy Battlemap style are pure orthographic. And so if I have the tabletop portion be orthographic, it will fit with the stamps. Because if I foreshorten the tabletop, then I'll also have to foreshorten the stamps as well. So I'm trying to follow the logic. And you can break these rules, by the way. It's okay. But just as a general rule for continuity, it's easier to do it this way. So now I have that tabletop part done. Now I want to show, how do I connect it to the floor? Does it have does it have legs? Is it a solid bar type table where there's a wooden face at the bottom part? Which one do I want? Do I want to add should I add in like a table legs, or should I make a thing? So I'll show you what I mean. So if I wanted to make legs, then I would probably use poles, because poles work really well. So if I type in pole, you'll notice that there are these poles right here. These work great for table legs. Just make sure that you bring them down a layer so that they're beneath it. Turn off that shadow. None. And then just bring the brightness down, because if the light is at the top going down on the table, that means whatever's underneath the table is going to be darker, right? And so I want to make sure that the legs of the table are dark because they're in the shadow of the table. So I put these side by side, and there's your very simple legs. Now, if I wanted to add supports to the legs, I could by simply rotating and maybe bring the size down, and then go like this. And then I have some simple supports for the table if I want to do that. So making the legs of the table not complex. Pretty easy stuff, right? What happens if I don't want to use legs for a table? What happens if I want to just use another table? I'm just going to ungroup this, and I'll go ahead and remove this one. And let's say that I want to make more of a bar-like table, right? And so I would bring this one underneath, like this. Let's flip it this way too, just so it's not all the same. And then this face would be even darker than the tabletop's front face. And then you would have a bar style table like this. And then you have that nice table there, and you can place it anywhere that you want. Now, when I do a table, it's up to you, but generally I try to do a mix between symmetrical and asymmetrical elements in my compositions. As an artist, when you have asymmetry and symmetry together, they contrast well, and that makes a very interesting composition. So if you do decide to put your big table in the center, then make sure that there are maybe other elements that are in the workspace, that means the floor space, that also have asymmetrical elements, so that way you have a contrast between your symmetrical and asymmetrical, because that's what generally makes a good composition, is when you have a mix of both. Okay, so I'm going to push this table kind of close enough up to where there's some room to where I can see the floor. And so now that I have that table, and I can add details as I see fit, but for now I'll create group, and I'm just going to call this the front counter. And it has a mix between all these different tables that I put together. So now I have my front counter, and I'm going to push this up probably to in the positive layers, so around 2 or 3, and leaving some layers in between for me to put stuff on top of the table, but also putting stuff behind the table, which is what will end up happening. So now that I've created the table, I'm just going to quickly save it, and then I'll go ahead and add some other elements, and then I'll add the details like stuff that's on the table, or maybe I want to add some interesting drapery on the table, or I want to add some engravings in the table, or I want to add some scratches, some burn marks. All those kind of things I do later. For now, I just make the basic shape. I've made the front counter shape table. I'll add the details later. Let's go ahead and make maybe... I'm trying to figure out the best way to try to visualize the weapons. And since we're in a tent, maybe I think it would be more interesting and unique looking not to have some kind of shelf system that displays the weapons, but have them hanging from the ceiling. And then that way it looks a little bit more interesting. It fits more with, I think, the more orc aesthetic. So I'll end up doing that. Let's go ahead and let me change up the tent a little bit. So I want to give you an example of how I would kind of change it up. So with the tent, you know how with a tent, it's drapery and it has folds. So what I'll do here at the bottom is I'll just add a little bit. I'm going to take my softness all the way off, and I should have this brush. You can see I turn the softness off, and I'm going to create a little bit of curve at the base here, because that is what cloth does, right? It doesn't fold perfectly straight. And so to kind of give it more of the illusion of a tent, I'll kind of break the perfect straightness of it. And I think that works out a lot better there. So that looks good. I have that front desk. Let's do that. Okay. Let's go ahead and have some stuff hanging, some weapons hanging. So let's start by choosing some weapons. And I think there should be some orc weapons. And you can see that there's some other weapons that are coming with 2.0, like some dwarven stuff. And then also there's like bombs, dynamite. There's going to be all kinds of cool stuff, more revised stuff. So you'll see there's a lot of cool new weapons that will be kind of coming out with 2.0. So that will be very helpful. So let me just go over to the orc pack itself. That makes it a little bit easier so I can all stick within the same theme. So orc here, and you can see the weapons here. I'll go ahead and just take every single weapon and just kind of place them on the map here. Let's see, that's a weapon. Let me see what other weapons we have. I think for now, those will work well. That works great. Okay. And I'm probably going to want to scale them up a little bit so they're a little bit bigger. And then I'll rotate them to where they're all kind of facing upward, like this. I think that looks good. This looks good. There we go. All right. Now, if they're going to be hanging, there needs to be a way for them to hang, right? So what I might do is put a loop at the top of each one of these so that way either a rope or a chain can kind of connect to the weapon as it dangles down. So I'll go into maybe the shape tool. I'll go to circle, and I'm going to pick something to work as like a loop. I'm not sure what to use here. We'll go over, I think maybe a pipe A pipe might work well. You notice here we have this small copper pipe, this metal pipe right here. This might work well. I'll take the circle shape. I'm going to make a very simple circle. I'm going to bring the size down like this. I think that looks good. And I'm going to turn the shadow off on it. And then I'll go ahead and take that. And I might want to change, bring the saturation down, bring the brightness down. And I'm going to take that and put each one of these, copy and paste, onto each weapon like this. So now that each weapon has a way to hang, so that works out well. So I'll group it, call this one a sword. Create, sword is done. Create, this will be an axe. And I'm not sure what you would call this one. Actually, some kind of axe or maybe a crescent of some kind. I'm not sure. Okay. So we have those weapons there. That works out just fine. Now, when I'm making this, I'm going to go ahead and when I'm having them hang from the ceiling, the way that I'll do it is I don't want them to be all hanging at the exact same height. A sickle? Oh, yeah, that's a good one, Chesbeck. A sickle sounds right. I'll probably change the name of that later. So when you are hanging the weapons, there's a way that you want to show depth. And the first thing is that you don't want them all hanging at the exact same length. I think having various lengths of them hanging will be more interesting. So, and I think what I'll do is I'll have maybe like the axe hanging down the lowest. I'll have a sword hanging right here, and then having the crescent be a little bit closer while the sword's a little further away. So I think about that looks good. Like that. And next I'm going to go in and choose either a rope or a chain. That's up to you. I think a chain is going to look more interesting. It's a little more intimidating. And we'll use like a hell chain so it's spiky. I think that will be more interesting. And I'll change that saturation. I'll bring the brightness up just a little bit. And I'll quickly put one chain down. And I'll use the pen for this. And then I'll kind of look at it just to see what it looks like. Is it the right size? Is it the right scale? I think that looks about right. I'll turn the shadow off. And then I'll just take that and just place this right on top like that. Copy and paste that chain. Copy and paste another one. Perfect. There we go. So now I can group the whole thing, create group, and we'll call it hanging sword. Perfect. That one's done. Create group, hanging axe. Great. And then this one can be hanging sickle. Thanks to everyone for catching on that. Awesome. Or, sorry, hanging. Got the hanging part. Perfect. Cool. Now that we have that put together, that's helpful. So we have our nice weapons hanging here. Now, if you wanted to show depth, like how is it that I show that maybe the sword is further back than the axe? How would I go about doing that? That's not complex. There's a couple things you can do. One, you can use overlap, right? To show that the sword is behind the axe, simply place the sword behind the axe, right? There's that first step. But what happens if they kind of blend together? You notice that they're on the same brightness. So I can use contrast to show depth. So let me give an example. So if I select the sword and I open it up, and I select specifically the sword and I bring the brightness down just a little bit to where it's noticeably darker than the axe, you'll notice that now it creates this sense of contrast where the sword looks like it's further in the background while the axe is closer to you, right? So you're going to use brightness and you're going to use overlap to create depth. So that's really the secret. And what I might want to consider doing is taking some other weapons, so maybe like some axes and some other weapons from other packs, and throwing them in here using different depths and different tricks. So like with this one, I wanted to show that maybe this one is also kind of behind it. I'll kind of just bring the brightness down on this weapon. In fact, I might even want to flip it a little bit so that way it's facing that way, and I just bring the brightness down a little bit. Just remember that when you do the brightness, it has to be considerably or noticeably darker than what's in front of it, right? So in other words, you don't want to have it to where it's like so dark that it's just pure black, basically. Otherwise, you're trying to show that it's way in the background, but you also don't want it around the same brightness as the thing in front of it. So again, noticeably darker than what's in front of it. That's going to be very, very helpful, okay? So I'll put that there, and I'll put this one here. Let's go ahead and select them all and kind of have them hanging like this. And then I'll probably want to create some other weapons as well. I can just type in weapon in the catalog, and then we'll take some already existing weapons as well. Like this mace, I think, is kind of an intimidating weapon. It works well. This kind of club with spikes in it is a nice one. I'm trying to think what else ones we can use. I think those should be enough, actually. Those should be enough. I'm checking to see if there's any other weapons that might work well. I think those should be enough. So let's go ahead and add those. I'll go ahead and turn the shadow off for both of them. I don't need those. And then I'm also going to grab that loop from within the group. I'm going to scale these down just a little bit. There we go. And then I'll add that loop. One there, one there. There we go. So we have those loops. And I'll go back in the group and grab the chain. You're going to be doing a lot of copying and pasting. That's something that you do when you're creating anything. It doesn't have to be a shop. It could be a fantasy world map. It could be a parchment map. It could be a battle map. Whatever it might be, right? So we'll create this group. We're going to call it a hanging club, spiked club. And this one right here, I believe, is a mace. Spiked mace, I think. Hanging spiked mace. Nice, there we go. Okay, so now you have all of those elements here. That's perfect. So I'll go ahead and bring some in the foreground. I'll put this one in front, so it's kind of in front of it. With the overlap, that spike right in the front helps to make that pop out more. Put a little bit of overlap right here, and I'll kind of put this one maybe a little higher up. And then also, if you want to show depth, you can also make things in the far background a little bit smaller. Because we're in a shop, there's not much distance. Like there's not going to be like a mile away, but you can show some depth differences by just bringing it down just a little bit smaller. So you can do that as well, just to let you know. Just remember that if you want it to be in the further background, we have to bring the brightness down quite a bit more. And because that's quite a bit darker, I want to do the same to these as well. That chain loop is going to be a little bit darker, and this chain is going to be a little bit darker as well, just for that continuity, right? There you go. So now you kind of have these weapons that are kind of hanging. So now you have that. So that kind of looks good, right? So we have those weapons. I'll quickly save it. So from here, what I'll end up doing is I'll start adding in just a couple details to like the ceiling, a couple details to the floor and to the table, because I've got the three things that are most important. I've got the background, foreground, and the middle ground. The background is the backside, is the wall of tent. The middle ground is the weapons hanging, and the thing in the foreground is the table. There are three different layers that I work with: background, middle ground, foreground. Okay, so now that I've got that together, now I can kind of like add in just a couple details to make it more interesting. Like for instance, I maybe want to have some ornamentation or some kind of drapery from the ceiling, because right now I just have this very flat kind of thing at the top. And so to kind of fix that, I'll go into Orc, and you can take things like these Orc wall pieces like this, and these work great. You can use these as kind of a decoration at the top to make it look like there's some drapery. So if I turn the layer off on this and go like this, I can have some drapery kind of hanging from the top that kind of makes it look more interesting. There we go. I'll add that there. I think right about that looks good, right about there. And of course, I might want to bring these hanging down just a little bit more. And I think these might want to be a little bit darker, being higher up in the ceiling space. So we'll put them a little bit darker. There we go. Hey, Gunny. And I don't really actually care for the textures that we used actually for the tent. And for this, I think it looks kind of odd. So we'll change things up a little bit to make it more interesting. There's all kinds of fun things that we could do to kind of fix that problem, to make like a better background. For instance, we could already use these already existing kind of folds and stamps that already exist here. And we can simply just bring the brightness down to show that this is in the far background, like this dark kind of thing. And we can take multiple of these. We can play around with them, flip it like this, maybe have some there, put another one, we'll flip it, make it a little bit bigger, go across here like this. And then you have a little bit more folds, I think, and that looks a little bit more interesting in the tent. And what it also does is it helps to make the weapons kind of pop out a little bit more. So I think that works out okay. So we have that weapon shop there, and we have that. I might want to work on the tent floor to be a little bit different. This looks a little odd. I think the texture scale is off, and maybe I want to do something a bit different. Like, for instance, I could take this and change the scale up to make it a little bit bigger. I think that works out well. And I'll go ahead and just paint that on there. That looks a little good. Let's add maybe a little bit more dirt to it. Let's see here. I do think there is a dry grass texture. If I just type in dry, you have this dry grass right here. This might work good. Let me change the scale. And then let's maybe change the brightness a little bit of it. There we go. And then I'll just kind of apply... Oopsie, I just realized I don't have the softness on. I generally try to do blending with the softness on, and then I'll bring the opacity down a little bit. And I can just go ahead and apply some dirt to the floor here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and put this front desk right here. And in fact, what I'll do is I'm not going to have it perfectly centered. Notice how the weapons are almost kind of centered symmetrically. But if I'm going to, because I did that, I might want to consider end up maybe moving the desk over, or the front desk to the side. You could put it in the center. Again, just make sure that you put elements on the floor space that makes it less symmetrical. It's up to you on how you want to do it. I think either one works fine. You can line them up. Just again, remember, add those asymmetrical elements to it. Let's go ahead and put like a couple weapons on the table as well. I think that might be a good idea. And in fact, we might want to consider maybe we could put like, I don't know, maybe some kind of rug or something on top of the table. We already have like a cloth kind of theme going on with the cloth of the tent. Why not add a little bit more cloth? So what we could do is maybe use a rug to do that. I can type in rug. I kind of like this colorful woven rug. It's got that reddish color. It has that nice like frill on the edge there. Now the only problem is that it doesn't, it in its pure orthographic projection, it doesn't really work well on the table, right? Notice how it doesn't work well on the table. So I might cheat a little bit and play around with it so I can mess with the hot bars. Just so you know, these hot bars will only show up when the staff is at 0 degrees. Watch what happens to the hot bars when I move it a degree. See? Hot bar goes away. So if you want to use those white hot bars to transform the shape, you're going to have to, it's not a skew, by the way, it's just a transform. You'll have to use those hot boxes and use them at 100% or at 0 degrees. Otherwise, you have to go to transform and change the width and height manually here with the transform option in the advanced settings. If you don't see them, you might have to scroll down a little bit to find them, depending on what the zoom is on your monitor, okay? But I think overall, the rug looks fine right here like this. I might want to maybe bring the brightness down a little bit on the rug, just so it kind of fits more of that darker red color. I could also maybe bring the contrast up a little bit to give it more of that darker reddish kind of color. And you can even rotate it just a little bit like this. There we go. So now we have that. Then I can go in and start placing some stuff on top of all of that. Like I maybe want to put a weapon on top of here. Let's maybe put a couple weapons. Let's just type in weapon here. Maybe I want to put in some daggers or something as well. So I'll put a couple daggers right here on the side like this. And then maybe I want to add in maybe a mace hanging in. So I'll kind of put a mace like right here. Let's put it right here. And overlapping is what's going to make it look nice. So the fact that the weapon is overlapping on some of the tabletop and some of the rug, that's going to make it look a little bit nicer. So I'll go ahead and place these where I want them. Have it overlap some of the table a little bit going off the table. This one too overlaps like this. This one overlaps a little bit. So that works out well. And then, let me take a step back and look at it and see where we're at. I think overall that looks good. Why don't we show a way to show like currency? I don't know if it's barter, then maybe just have the weapons on the table. But if you're showing maybe some kind of money system, then maybe put like a coin purse on the table, and then maybe put some coins down on the table as well, like this, just to kind of show that there's some coins there. So maybe they work through a monetary system. I don't know. That's really up to you and what you're doing with your world and your players and stuff. But that always looks nice adding that in there. So you can kind of see that we've got the floor put together. We've got the back walls of the tent. And we also have our front table. We've got some stuff hanging in the ceiling there. In fact, we might want to add in more details there. You'll notice that I shift between like adding details to the table and then adding details to the walls. I kind of do this so that way when you're viewing it, I'm not doing one thing the whole time, and I want to be able to fit it all into the stream. So next, what I'll use is I'll use the line tool to create some hanging chains, and I'll use the line tool for this. And what you can do is you can click, hold like this, and then you can drag like this to create curves, or you can just click, hold, drag like this, and you can create some chains that are hanging like this, and that will give it a little bit more interesting feel to it. So I'll take these chains like this and kind of have them hanging from the ceiling. Maybe not have them all be perfectly going straight to the center, maybe having some of them kind of loop over kind of like this, and then maybe just have some just hanging down like this, like maybe there were some weapons that were hanging there like this. Okay, and I probably want to remove the caps on these. So this one right here, this one right here, this one right here. I can either remove the caps or I can put something there. I think might not be a bad idea to maybe throw some spikes or something. Might not be a bad idea. That way I don't have to remove the cap, so I can just put a spike on top of there. It looks a little too bright. Let's desaturate and bring the brightness down a little bit and turn the shadow off. Perfect. So I'll copy and paste and then put these spikes on top of here like that. A little too dark, maybe just a little bit brighter. There we go. And so now we kind of have some stuff hanging in the ceiling space. We have our floor here. Maybe we want to add some stuff like maybe some weapons or something leaning up against the wall. So maybe I want to take like this club right here, copy, paste. Because it's in the background, I'm bringing that brightness down. And I'll have it kind of be leaning up against here like that. Maybe I want to take another weapon like this mace right here, and I want to have it leaning up against the tent face. So I'll just bring the brightness down a little bit to it, so that way it shows that these weapons are in the middle ground, while these weapons leaning up against the tent are in the further background. Yeah, the curve, first time chatter, learning the curve thing is so incredibly helpful, and there's two ways to do it, right? You can just click, hold, and drag, or you can click, make a line, and then hold, and then drag, and then change, but do like a Bezier curve. So kind of helpful to learn that curve thing. In fact, we'll probably maybe even do a whole video on kind of how to use the line and shape tools a little bit more easily. So I don't know if that's necessarily a masterclass one. Let's go ahead and add in just a couple more weapons. I think there should be some more stuff leaning up against the tent. I think like a crossbow. Like there's no ranged weapons, so maybe we'll put like a crossbow leaning up against here like this. And because there's an arrow on it, I'll lean it this way. And again, just bring that brightness down so that it kind of looks like it's in the background there. Go. I think that looks good. Maybe there's a forge somewhere that you can't see. This is just a storefront, but maybe there's a forge, so we'll have to throw in maybe some lighting effects and some other things. Like maybe I want a forge to be off screen to the left, and so I'll maybe put some dark, or some, not dark, but some light sources that show that, right? Maybe I'll add a filter that has some sparks flying in the air, right? And so we'll kind of go over how to do that. Just one moment, we'll let this save, and then we'll add in a couple more details. We'll throw in some filters. It's 3:44, so about 15 minutes till, so let's go ahead and keep adding in more detail stuff. Let's go ahead and also take a couple weapons and then also have them leaning up against the front desk. I think that might be a good idea. So maybe we can take like this sword right here, and I'll desaturate it so it doesn't look like a hell theme, and then I'll just kind of lean it right up against this table like this, just to create even more depth. So I'll lean this sword up against here like this, so that way there's a little bit more extra depth there. I think that looks okay. Let me just take a step back and look at it. Okay. I think I feel like I do want to have a little more stuff on the floor. I think so. Maybe we can choose things like, I think there's some dirt mounds that might work well. We can put some of that on the floor. Might not be a bad idea. Let's turn that shadow off. And I'll go to transform. And I'll change that width a little bit. Bring the brightness down a little bit. There we go. And I'll go ahead and put these down a couple layers. That way I have like something. Oh, I want to show something like overlapping the 10th floor. So I'll put a couple of these down. Let's make this one a little bit bigger. Maybe put that one over here on this side. And then we'll copy and paste and maybe put this one over here like this. There we go. That way I kind of have a little bit more dimension on my floor. I think that looks okay. Make sure it looks good. Okay, that looks fine. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and select everything and just lock it so that way I don't accidentally select anything, because you notice that I've got quite a bit done here already. Okay. Okay. All right. Oh, that's a good question, Shezbek. That's a good question. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Again, artists generally choose what looks best and not necessarily what's 100% accurate, right? That's why they use a mix between both orthographic or some oblique, top-down oblique, or they might use anometrics. Can't even pronounce it right, my bad. They switch between those. So a lot of video games do this. Even people who make battle maps, they generally will mix between different graphical projections, because whichever looks the best is what most artists will end up choosing, right? You don't have to stick to a 100% top-down oblique or 100% orthographic, right? You can mix and match them. So it's always important to kind of factor that in. So, I mean, I guess if you're like a mathematician and you're really into math, that might drive you insane because, oh, well, this is at 45 degrees and this one isn't. That'll rack your brain for sure. But as an artist, we're not thinking about the mathematical equations. We're thinking about what is going to look the most appealing to the viewer who's looking at it, right? That's just something, that a decision that artists have to make. So what I want to do is I want to show that maybe I want to add some filters, to add some things, some light sources to make things more interesting. So let's kind of go over what we think works best here. Let's start with some filters. I think that would be kind of nice. One of the filters that I use a lot with these shops is a texture filter called Vignette. And what Vignette does is it adds shaded corners, which I think works well in this kind of setting, because what those shaded corners do is it shades those corners, creating like this black frame around the edges, and then it creates the center of the map being lighter, and that makes that part, the center part where all the content is, like the weapons and the floor and all this stuff, that kind of pops out because now it's lighter while the things around the edge are darker. That's how you kind of create the things popping out more in the center, adding that vignette. The next thing I'll kind of add is I'll add a color filter that works best for the map that I'm making. You'll notice that there's a lot of reds in the map, so a red sky filter might work well here. So if I turn it off, you see what it looks like here, but when I add a red filter, it adds a little bit more reds to it, giving it a little bit more feel to it, right? It suits well to it. For instance, if you were making an ocean scene, you might want to consider using something like winter or overcast, right? So when you're choosing a color filter, it really depends on the theme, right? It's orc, I have a bunch of red stuff, add a red sky filter. That works best, I feel, in this scenario, right? The other things I might want to add are some filters from different ones. Like maybe I want to add in old paper, or I want to add in some other texture. Someone right there, Blinkers. Yes, there's a great one. There's a couple ones that we can actually use. Now you can access multiple filters by clicking. When you open up a filter, you click the thumbnail to go into the category. You'll notice that there's a tag right here called Inkarnate. If you click that Inkarnate tag at the top there, it's going to load every single filter that's from every single style. So that way you can use filters across styles. And there's a couple that you can use here. There's one called Old Paper, which works great, but there's also another one called Leather. And I use a mix between both of these. And what these do is it adds a little bit more grime to it. So if I take this, I'll choose repeat so that way it doesn't stretch. And then I'll also change the blend mode. Now, something about using filters across styles is that if you use a filter that's designed for Fantasy World in Fantasy Battlemaps, it will not have the default blend mode. Okay, so you'll have to change the blend mode for filters that are from different styles. But if you're working in Fantasy Battlemaps and you're using a filter that's from the Fantasy Battlemap style, it will have the blend mode already adjusted for you. So just know that one thing. And the blend mode that I normally use for stuff like this is overlay, just like Blinka's just said. So I go overlay, and what this does is it adds some more artifacts, and it adds a little bit more grime to the map. And you'll notice, and it uses contrast to kind of do that. So if I go in here, and I'll bring it all the way up so you can kind of see what it looks like. I usually go around 50 to 80% when I use this, but let me turn it off so you can kind of see it. See the difference? It's added a little bit more grime to it. So I like using this, and what it also does is it also kind of blends the stamps better. Same thing with that red sky. It helped to kind of make sure all the stamps kind of blend in better using a color filter, right? So I've got that. The other thing I might want to do is maybe I want to have some sparks floating around. Maybe there is a forge to the left or to the right, and it's not in the tent, it's outside of the tent. But some of the sparks from the forge kind of filter its way into the storefront. Now, it's kind of important to maybe add some detail like that, because who made these weapons? Where did they come from? So adding in the hint of a forge to the side is a great detail to do that. So I'll go into the catalog. I'm going to make sure that I have just Fantasy Battlemaps. I don't want to have Inkarnate selected. And I'm going to choose light. And I'm going to use a orange light source to kind of represent the light emanating from the forges going into the tent. So if I take this light source, I'm going to use the number 2 one and place it right here on the side. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that the light is behind the desk, but in front of the wall, right? Because this way I don't have the light, because what happens if there's like a wall or a piece of cloth that's blocking and it doesn't get to that table? So I'll put that light source right there. I'll use the orange one because it's going to represent like a flame or a fire. And then I'll use another light source. I'll use this whiter or more yellowish color, and then I'll kind of put it off to the side here like this. You can see what it looks like without, and that way you can see this light source kind of coming in. And then I'll go into my filter catalog, go to filters, and I'm going to go add new filter, and I'm going to go plus with the texture filters, open up the catalog, and then I'm going to go over to Sci-Fi Battlemaps. And there should be a spark filter like this, and you'll see the sparks. Let me bring the opacity all the way up so you can kind of see it. Now, there's a lot going on there, so I maybe want to choose repeat, and then maybe choose the size. Let me bring it up a little bit. That's a little too much sparks. I don't want to have that much, so what I'll end up doing is I'll delete that, and then I can go into the catalog and just look for sparks, because there are sparks there. That filter, I wanted to have the sparks just near where the light source was. So if I just type in spark, oopsie, my mistake. If I type in spark, like this, you'll have some sparks here. And I want to have them be like just over here on this side. And I don't want them to have too crazy because, hey, realistically, having a forge next to a tent probably isn't the best choice because you're going to catch the cloth on fire, right? But I do want to show the hint of a forge in the area, so I'll put some sparks and a light source there, and that will hopefully kind of convey that there is a forge there. You can add other things like a hammer, if you wanted to show that there was like maybe like a forge over there. So maybe there's a hammer kind of going off into the background like this. Let me make sure the opacity is all the way up. I'll desaturate it so it looks like a metal one. Bring the brightness down, or bring the brightness up. It's going to be in the light. Like this. And then maybe I want to have this hammer in the background like this, just to kind of show that, hey, the forge in this is in this direction, right? So kind of helpful there. Now, I might want to consider adding just a couple more details to the front part. Like, for instance, maybe I want to show some weapons in the furthest foreground, like the furthest things closest to me. And so what I might do is like I can take a weapon like this, make it pure black, and then maybe have it be like leaning up against stuff. So I could take like this weapon here. Maybe I want to take this axe right here, make it pure black like this, and then kind of put it in the foreground like this. And then what you have is some weapons, and then the light that's emanating from the back right there is making it look like the stuff in the foreground is silhouettes. So you can do that as well. You could also do silhouettes of chains at the top as well if you wanted to. So I could take like this chain, bring it to pure black like this. I'll bring the scale up a little bit so it's a little bit bigger. And then I can have, and then make sure it's set to a layer above all these other chains. So bring it up like this. And then I can have some larger chains in the foreground like this to add some further depth to the map like that. So you can add some further details by adding that. So silhouettes are a great way of kind of showing that. So just make sure that this is all set up this way. Make sure this is set up this way. There we go. All right, so you can show silhouettes. All right. So now once I've kind of put all that stuff together, then I can start worrying about things like lighting. You notice that I've established a light source. So now what I should do is I should establish where all the light sources are. There's one from the forge on the left, but what happens if there's an opening in the tent, right? And I want to show light going into the tent. So I might want to consider putting a light source right where the front desk is, just to show that there's an opening there. So I'll take this light source right here like this and just place it like right here. And that will make it look like there is a opening in the tent. Maybe you want it to be a different color too, like an eerie color. Like maybe I want it to be like a purple color. Let's bump the saturation up, bump the brightness up, and I'll change the hue. So you can change the colors. Like maybe I want to have like an eerie greenish color, like a cool color. You notice that I have a lot of warm colors in here. Maybe I want to have an eerie greenish color because maybe outside of the tent there's this eerie fell-like environment that you're living in, or maybe make it purple or whatever. Change the color up because you've already got a lot of warm colors here. Why not break it up and add some different color lighting in there just to spice it up a little bit? So that's up to you, or you can just leave it at the original color like this. I personally kind of like adding a little bit of color to it, a cooler color. I think that makes it a little more interesting. So now that we've established all the light sources, now we can go in and start painting in some shadows. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go to top. I'm going to bring the opacity down to around 30 or so. I'm going to choose the color black. You could use a dark red if you wanted to. That's up to you. And then I want to go over to my layer section in the right panel. Go click that cog that says layer options, and I'm going to click overlay like that. And then what I'll do is I'll just look at where each light source is and paint my shadows being cast away from where the light source is. So let me give you an example. So there's a light source right here, you see? So what I'll do is I'll take that dark color right here and I'll put some shadows along here to show that that is where the light source is. So all along this side, and I'll even put some on, I'll even paint a little bit on it as well. So put some dark shadow here. Same thing here. Let's see where the lighting is. There's lighting right here, and there's lighting right here. So there's probably going to be a little bit of shadow work on this side here. Probably going to be a little bit of shadow right here at the top parts, because the light sources are there. With this one, let's add a little bit of shadow underneath these ones. Let's add a little bit of shadow here. So you're kind of getting the general idea on how to do the shadowing. It's just wherever the light source is, the shadow is going to be cast away from where the light source is. And multiple light sources can be kind of difficult. And so you notice that there's a softer light coming from the front. And so you'll have to factor in a little bit of light, a little bit of shadow there, as well as a little bit of the light source that's coming from the forge on the left side. So it can be a little complex. I can do a before and after with the top layer. Oopsie, I'm sorry, knocking over a pen. I'm going to finish adding a little bit more shadow work to it. So I'll put a little bit of shadow underneath this one just to kind of show that it pops out, and a little bit of ambient occlusion. If you're not sure what ambient occlusion is like a drop shadow. And I like to add a little bit of ambient occlusion to most of my stamps because ambient occlusion makes a stamp pop out with contrast. So I'll put a little bit, just a little bit in there, just to kind of add it in. I think that looks kind of nice personally. So add that. And then what I'll do is I'll add a little bit more shadowing as well at the top of the tent, like up here. So some of this probably should be a little bit darker. And so I'll go ahead and paint some shadows up at the darker part up here like this. There we go. That looks good. Because there's not much light source here, I'll go ahead and put some darkness on this side as well. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll add some highlights. So if there are two colors of light, you have an orange, reddish, or orangish light from the forge and a greenish light from the environment outside. So we'll do both. Let's go ahead and choose that orangish color that we want to represent. And then what we'll do is we want to remember to set it to overlay. Bring that opacity down. Let's go about 25. I'm just going to place it down just to see what it looks like. I just want to make sure that I have an idea. Let's bring the opacity up a little bit more. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, there we go. And then just like we did when you're doing your highlights, instead of the highlights being cast away from the light source, they should be facing the light source. So you would have some highlights right on this thing right here. You would have some highlights along here, some highlights along this table here, along this weapon, some here, maybe a little bit here and here, along this edge of this weapon here like this, so that we get some highlights along here and here. Let's put a little bit of highlight there, along this edge here, a little bit here, just wherever that light source is kind of coming from, a little bit here and along here. Okay, there you go. Now when we take a step back, you'll see the highlights, that lighting already helped to make it pop out. That's like one of the biggest tricks with making a two-dimensional look more three-dimensional. It's highlights and shadows, okay? Very, very, very helpful, and it's easy to do. Just set it to overlay, use whatever color for the lighting for highlights, whether it's orange or green, and then use black for the shading. Now you artists can change things up. If you want, you can use a dark red to represent your shadows, or you can take a complementary color to red, like a dark green, and use that, because red and green complement each other. So you could do that too. So it's up to you to decide, and that's really depends on your skill level as an artist. If you're just beginning to do highlights and shadows, just do yellow and then do black to do it. That's just a good start. It just really depends on that. So next, I'll go ahead and choose those same dimensions, the same opacity, brush size, but I'll choose a green color, right? So now I have this green color, and now I'll add my highlights from the green. So there should be some highlights. Oopsie, that's a little too much. Let's maybe bring the opacity down a little bit. Let's go with 39. There we go. So I'll add my still a little too high. Let's go down a little bit more. Yeah, that looks better. So we'll add some green highlights to the coins. We'll add some green light highlights to here, maybe some green light to here, wherever that is. So we'll add in some highlights also on the table as well. There we go. Added some highlights there. That looks good. Maybe even add some highlights on this rug right here, along here. There we go. There you go. Okay, where are we set for time here? Oh, perfect. We just finished it. But, all right. So, making a shop, not complex, right? It's understanding a little bit about graphical projection. Remember, we talked about orthographic, top-down oblique, and the other one, which I can't pronounce right now because of just having a brain fart. But understanding those graphical projections will help you with making shops. But just to know, you can also do these graphical projections with battle maps, by the way, and I have done that before. I find that top-down oblique actually works okay with battle maps. It's clearly not as utility as, say, purely orthographic, but it adds a whole new dimension to combat. It adds a new dimension to travel, because then you can use that front face for climbing, for kicking enemies off a ledge or off a box or off a countertop or whatever, off a table. Adding in some of that top-down oblique, it can be helpful when making some battle maps. I don't do it with every battle map because my players don't like it when I use the same perspective or style for every single map. They like it better when I mix it up. So sometimes I'll make a top-down oblique I'll never use the other one, the anoxometric, whatever one. I never rarely use that one for battle maps, making a battle map, but I will use the top-down oblique for making battle maps because it's oblique, right? The top face is, or the depth is the same dimensions as the face. And so that's very helpful because at least it maintains some orthographic feel to it, making it easier for your players to navigate on the map. We'll have to do a whole making top-down oblique battle maps as a masterclass in the future. But I hope you guys got the general idea, right? Just remember to make the floor, to designate the floor and the wall. Remember to designate the floor first, so that way you have space to put things on the floor. That will depend on what the theme is. You choose that theme. It's orc weapons. Then I made that front counter. That's going to be your storefront. Then you're going to have that middle ground, which is where the hanging weapons are. And then I made a background, which is that tent in the background, right? So now you have those 3 different layers, and then you'll just switch between each layer. You don't have to like say, oh, well, I'm going to work on the front desk, front counter, and I'm going to put every detail on it from beginning to end. I don't generally do that. I don't generally do like, oh, step 3 and then complete step 3 right immediately, get it all done. What I'll do is I'll switch between my steps. And what that does is it helps me because sometimes I get bored working on one step. And so by switching between steps, it helps me to do that. That might not work for you. Maybe it's easier for you to do one step from beginning to end and then go on the next step. I find that it works better for me to go through the various steps and to jump back and forth. And also, things are subject to change. You're going to find that. Like, for instance, I might not like the way that I made, like let's say that I finished making my countertop, and then I was working on my weapon display. But I ended up liking my weapon display more than my countertop, and so I went back to the countertop and made some changes to it, right? That's going to happen. You're going to be working on something and be like, oh, I like the way that I did this. I want the rest of the layers to be similar in that design. And so you'll end up changing it. So that's helpful for me to be a little bit more elastic about the steps, because otherwise the perfectionist part of my brain will want to finish the table, finish the background, finish all the weapon displays, and then that's it. And so switching between those various steps helps you to kind of stay focused, to help you not lose interest, and to kind of help you not fall into that trap of perfectionism, because that happens with my neurospicy brain all the time. I get perfectionist, and to get out of that trap, I'll jump from step to step, back and forth. That's very helpful. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for letting me blab on endlessly to show you how to make shops. Hopefully I'll see other people's shops in the future. I'd love to see what people come up with. And if you have suggestions for future shops, let me know. I've made all kinds of variations of this stuff. Like I've made like thieves guilds, assassins guilds, dovecots. There's all kinds of different scenes. It doesn't have to be a shop. You can make a guild, whatever it might be. All kinds of a tavern scene, a tavern room or an inn room scene, whatever it is that your players like. And the last thing I'll say about making these is that some of you might say, well, I don't like to use visuals when I'm describing things to my players. I prefer theater of mind. Just so you know, that's perfectly fine. Everyone has their preferences about whether they prefer a visual aid or using a theater of mind. What I've kind of noticed to be helpful is that you can use the visual aid, or if you prefer theater of mind, make the map, make this particular shop, but then use the shop to describe the details of the shop to the players. For instance, my players might not like visuals, so I'll look at the map that I made and describe the scene. And it's easier to do theater of mind because I have an image that I'm referencing and describing the details as I'm telling my players where they are. For instance, when I use theater of mind, I might say, you enter into a tent where there seems to be hanging weapons. There's a table here. Your players are looking for something, and I can describe that scene because I have a visual aid there. So you're still doing theater of mind, but you're not showing the visual aid to your players, but you're describing the visual aid that you made to the players. So you can still do this with theater of mind or use it as a visual. I find that it works both ways, and that's really up to your players and what they like. Again, players are fickle. They might say, I only like theater of mind, or I only like visuals, or I like a mix of both. That's something that you have to decide for yourself. Pilot M, I am not a developer. I am on the team though. So I'm in charge of the YouTube channel. I do all the videos. I am also in charge of a couple other things, but I am not a developer. I don't know coding. So just so you know. All right. All right. Hey, I'll go ahead and make this map clonable. I'll put it on my Maddie profile so that if you guys do like this, you can clone and edit it and do what you want with it. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you all on Friday. I think we're doing Parchment World Map Part 5, I think, which I look forward to. I think we're going to be working on a biome. I don't know which one we'll be doing yet. We did forest in the last one. Maybe with the next one, we'll do plains or grass or something like that. So I'll kind of let you guys decide that if you want. All right. Please stay safe and healthy. Merry map making, and I will see you all on Friday, okay? Take care now.